business and also the lives of those individuals who are employed by your pharmacy. Please begin.
Yes. Well, our first encounter with the DEA was probably in 2012. They came by my office looking for another gentleman, and they subsequently took, I'd say about, I think the last one, I think something about $3 million worth of equipment and drugs in total from our pharmacy at that time. Those figures may be a little different, but the point is they came and they seized this property, and I was never arrested, never charged with anything. We had about 4 employees then. Our pharmacy was doing maybe about 3 to 4 million a year. We were smaller then. We weren't. We were doing some compounding, but we hadn't expanded into our other little facility, which was next door. They then came back in 2000, I believe it was 2017, perhaps, claimed they were doing an administrative inspection. An administrative inspection is a way based on a complaint, or as we later found out, Florida Board of Pharmacy inspector that came in and claimed that she was looking for our records and was looking at our compounding medications, controlled drug medications, and those sort of things. Why were we compounding versus buying it from commercially available, which we were doing both. And so that led to this investigation by the DEA that then claimed that we were they came about 4 or 5 times. They couldn't find anything wrong because we did everything by the book, everything by what we would call the book, the way we were trained in terms of recording, handling patients, and those sort of things. And then in 2019, we got to fast forward, they came in and raided our pharmacy. They seized our equipment. They also seized our medications, and they handed me what they call a warrant in which our DEA registration, that's our ability to order medications as a pharmacy, control medication, was suspended. And subsequently, we had a hearing, which is all but a kangaroo court. And that hearing resulted in it's almost 100% always decided by the DEA, because this so-called administrative hearing is a court that the judge is hired by the Drug Enforcement Agency. They are employees they work directly for the Drug Enforcement Administrator hearing, and they decide 99% of the time in favor of the Drug Enforcement Administration. If they decide differently, then those judges are fired. So it is a kangaroo court. Unfortunately, this court is unusual and peculiar in that it doesn't allow, it doesn't follow the rules of federal rules of civil procedure. However, it accesses both a criminal court and a civil court. So a decision in that court goes to the appeals court in that district, the federal appeals court. In this case, it would go to the 11th Circuit, which is out of Atlanta. If it was in, let's say something in Texas, I believe it is, or New Orleans, it would go to I think that's the 4th or 10th Circuit. But anyways, there's 13 circuits. So the system is rigged. You could also appeal to, what we did was we could get around that and go to the court, the district court, or the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, which the DEA headquarters is in, and they handle much of the agencies that are in there, agriculture, you name it, FBI, any federal agency generally is handled through the United States Court of Appeals, Washington, D.C. So that's sort of that's where we stand in terms of our legal decision. But by the time most people get up to that area, that level, they're financially broke. So the idea is to use that process to rule, to break you financially, in that sense, to break the business of the targeted individual financially. And that includes physicians, pharmacists, dentists, whatever. But that's how this process is rigged against us. Mm-hmm.
The second time that they came in,
mm-hmm.
they said was based on a complaint.
Well, they accused us of saying that we were involved in diversion. Yeah, diversion. And again, there's no specifics as to what this diversion is. In our case, there was no investigation. They were saying that because the diversion is based on speculation, in that people were coming distances, what they call great distances, to come to our pharmacy, that we took cash. We did not take very many insurances and stuff, and that's our prerogative and those sort of things. And that then they had one saying that people were coming in and getting refills, controlled substance refills, which if a person who's familiar with medicine knows that that's a lot of nonsense. You cannot refill any type of control to medication and those sort of things. And manufacturing was another thing. This is a way of redefining and misapplying medical procedures and pharmacy protocols, which have been there for about 200 years or so, in order to what they call entrap us, or to get us to find some fault or put it over to the public that we were doing something outside the practice of pharmacy. And this goes, and another thing, what we found out was that as this process came about and the development of the blog, you are within the norms.com, that this was affecting many Black healthcare providers, particularly our African American and Black healthcare providers, people of color, such Indian doctors, doctors from Africa, and from Arab doctors, and people who had tone in their skin. So we found out that we began to find out this was happening to disproportionately doctors. So I said, but we were disproportionately because it was happening to many healthcare providers. And they were using this process to simply put us out of business. Strong arm us is what we call it. Strong arms, and as a part of using the Controlled Substance Act as a part of what we call the opioid crisis in America. So the doctors were the ones, and the healthcare providers were the ones fueling the quote opioid crisis, which is another total aberration. And unfortunately, the media has bought into this type of this type of propaganda, if you want to call it. Yes, sir.
But I'm going back to the alleged complaint. Where would the complaint have come from?
Well, in this case,
the second time they came in on
the complaint. Yeah, the complaint supposedly came down from the Florida Board of Pharmacy, which was the inspector. But that's
wait a minute.
It came down because, yes, sir.
The Florida Board of Pharmacies, is that correct?
Right. Yes, sir.
Okay.
It allegedly
what
came
role,
down that way. That's
what role does a pharmacy board play in the business or the existence of pharmacies, whether it's in Florida, Texas, New York, wherever?
Mm-hmm.
What role do
compliance.
they play?
Compliance. They play a role of compliance. Every state and territory has a has some sort of regulation board or licensing and regulation. They make sure that your place is clean, that its hours are correct, that everybody there is licensed, whether they're the pharmacy technician or the pharmacist, make sure everybody's licensed. Those type of professional, what we call professional licensing and regulation, that we are compliant, that we're following all the guidelines and rules. We have medication. We have a way of tracking our medication, whether people sign in and sign out when you come in. So that's what role they play in that in pharmacy.
So
you'll see this
on the outside. Mm-hmm. On the outside of the pharmacy business, I'm calling it pharmacy business, or the pharmacy. The entity of pharmacies is a business. It's a business involved in healthcare. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. It is a business. If you're
board,
yes, sir.
The board of pharmacies or the pharmacy board, whatever state it's in, is in essence a private group. It's not a state-owned. The individuals place. It's a private group.
This is a state. All of them are state-run. No. They're all state-sanctioned. These are all state regulatory boards is what we call them. Regulatory. So they are an arm of the state. So it is the state that does the licensing. Mm-hmm.
They're appointed. The people who run the thing are basically they're working for the state, and they deal with compliance, as you point out.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, that's
okay.
What we have.
So a complaint from them, in terms of the court proceedings or the lawyering that you and others have done, what was revealed as it relates to the so-called board of pharmacies initiating that complaint on the second of that?
Yeah, here's what that process. That's it's a ruse, in that is a way to gain entry for the Drug Enforcement Agency to get in to inspect or to close your pharmacy down, to attack you. It's a gain entry. So, we got the board. Well, they send them over there. They're not supposed to do that, but they work together and collude. It's part of a collusion to come in and attack and to find justification to come in and so-called inspect is what we call it. Then it becomes inspect into investigation. And this is the process that is used throughout at least the state of Florida and basically throughout the country, that they use as a ruse to get in. Mm-hmm. To gain
and I'm moving around in terms of making clear for myself the information that you're sharing. The other pharmacies, whether they were in Texas, Virginia, or any other state, as you've uncovered by way of your newsletter, they were also, this is a statement question, they were also confronted with situations where the so-called complaint came by way of the Board of Pharmacies in their state?
Generally, yes. Generally, yes. I can't say that all are like that, but generally, that's how it appears to start. It could start, let's say somebody complained. I saw a bunch of people go to this pharmacy that had different licenses. It could be that. But generally, there's some triggering mechanism that gets them to get involved, okay?
Okay. All right. So in the first experience with the DEA, they took something like $3 million worth of equipment. Did I hear you correctly on that?
Exactly. Equipment, and that includes Medicaid properties, I would say. Property. I'd use the word property.
But how did you bounce back to be in business when they came back 5 years later? The first one was 2014. The second time was 2019. Is that
still the first one was 2012? Just, I mean, the business was there. Okay, it was a matter of we just had to work hard. I mean, we had to just work hard, and the idea was to try to put me out of business, but that didn't work because there are we're just doing everything correctly by the book. This comes out of nothing but targeting. That's part of the intimidation process. Let's put it that way.
Okay, that the last time they came in, just go through the last time. Were they 3 different occasions or just 2?
Well, they realized that when last time they came in, their job was their motive was to put me out of business, period. And this is what they do. And what we found out, this was a pattern they used in several other pharmacies were attacked at this time using this methodology by the DEA. It wasn't just us. We had at least 3 other Black pharmacies that were actively targeted at this time period. But then we found out there were several other Black-owned pharmacies that were targeted. Either they were and they were destabilized, is the word to put it. In other words, they were under attack. Our pharmacy, because they were either property was taken, or they would go in and tell your suppliers, do not sell to that person. And the attacks appeared to be generated from the Miami office. Well, they were generated from the Miami office at that time of the DEA. Under that time, it was under a lady named Susan Langston, and we wrote extensively about her. And it turns out that if you follow the pattern, it was a total abuse it's an abuse of authority that comes in, and it's become corruption. In other words, they can come in, they got the power to do whatever they want. They can come in and take your property, they can come in and not charge you with a thing, or intimidate your suppliers, intimidate the patients, come in and intimidate the physician. They can do whatever they want, and they've been doing it too. And this is throughout the entire country. And this is one of the behaviors that we found that simply has gone unchecked with the Drug Enforcement Agency in the entire United States.
Okay. What about the lawyering? What have you found has it been a pattern of lawyers and dealing with the pharmacies at this particular point in this conversation, that the losing of cases has had a pattern of of whatever from the lawyers? What have you seen across the board? And I'm not asking what have you picked up? That's what I'm asking.
Well, one of the things we picked up, let's put it this way. We've known you're talking about the counsels, that when a physician or a doctor finds themselves in this type of predicament, they'll get an attorney or counsel to represent them, or they will have that counsel on board. Okay, it's all over the place. Some are very, very good, and some are just, the majority of them are terrible. They don't understand the subject, or they are criminal attorneys, and they themselves are in it for the buck hustling. Generally, The fees run from anywhere from, I'd start out with 50,000 plus. So these, some of these attorneys, they go in, they represent themselves as criminal attorneys or experts in regulation, and they charge you this fee of $57,000, and their job is just to try to negotiate, and that's the worst thing you can do. You want somebody out there that's going to fight for you and going to win. There's no good negotiation, because negotiation means only one thing for a healthcare provider, whether they're a physician or dentist or pharmacist, whatever. That means loss of licensure. And you're subjecting yourself to imprisonment. And that's a real thing that is troubling. One is that many of us, when we went to school, we're the good guys who went to school, followed by the rules, never had any exposure to law enforcement. Particularly some of the people of color who are from other countries, they don't have any experience with law enforcement. They went straight through school, so they don't know the rules. They don't know, for example, about this little thing about you have the right to remain silent, those sort of things. You know, they figure they'll talk to the authorities without figured. I haven't done anything wrong, and mostly I have nothing to hide. And then they're done a disservice, because they don't teach this kind of stuff in school. And also, they're done a disservice by the boards, by professional organizations that simply have just been lackadaisical or not paid attention to what's happening in these with these regulatory agencies that come in and call themselves inspecting or trying to protect the public's interest. And in fact, that's the biggest hoax when they say that we're here to, you're an imminent danger to the public, without first pointing out the danger at all, or identifying any danger at all. That's what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm.
The
lawyering. Mm-hmm.
The lawyering, you point out that once they go into, they're hired into the situation, what the tendency has been is to negotiate with the prosecutor or the district, whatever the title is of these people. And that ends up with some kind of plea bargaining situation that is offered to the victim of the DEA.
Right.
And
exactly. So in other words, the lawyering has, in our aspect, the lawyering is that of a drug dealer. We're going to negotiate. When your lawyer comes in, I'll negotiate something so that you can get off of less fine, get a little spank on the hand. That's bull crap.
Okay.
So it undermines you. Mm-hmm.
Well, what you're saying, I'm playing it back, is that you hire a lawyer to fight a bogus case against you and the pharmacy, and they go in with the air that you are guilty of what the DEA has concocted, and therefore they do plea bargaining or negotiating, which comes out with a plea bargain offer from the so-called DEA prosecutor, and some people fall for it, some people, but that's what you're saying. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. You hit it right on the head.
Okay. Now listen, what is important, not what is important. There are a number of things that are important. I'm not that savvy in terms of the DEA structure. My information comes from you and other doctors and pharmacists who I've had the occasion to interview by way of yourself, meaning you giving me names and numbers, etc. That this whole thing has a methodology to it, not just the documents that they present, say we're here because of this, that, and the other. There's a whole structure to the destruction of these businesses. There's a structure to the, okay, that we want to explore in a separate interview, because you got to put this thing down so that we can see it. The first thing you do is this, the terminology is this, and how these outcomes. The other thing is that for the audience, and this is the wisdom table coming in from the Grand Houses in Harlem, USA. Our guest on Zoom is Dr. Norman Clement. He is a Black man who owns a pharmacy in Florida and has been basically driven out of business. Now, the importance of these interviews, ladies and gentlemen, I equate to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where they bombed the businesses, burned the Black-owned businesses out of existence, which was not only in Tulsa, but happened in Wilmington, North Carolina, happened in Rosewood, Florida, and any other number of cities and towns where there were vibrant, alive businesses where Black people were doing for self. Going back to post-slavery times and moving up to the present time, it appears to be an ongoing pattern of putting Black businesses out of business. So the importance of what's happening with the pharmacies, the Black pharmacies, is a national concern for Black people. Even though you're not in the pharmacy, you have to look at the pattern, the historic pattern that has been laid out or that exists of Black folks going into business, thriving, and then all of a sudden there's a charge against them. These people are not drug dealers. These people are not drug dealers, and they are extremely, my interviewing with them reveals high levels of intelligence and academic and practice achievements. These are not lightweight people. You decided at some point, Dr. Norman, to do a newsletter. Give us how that came to mind, what your first newsletter was, and the subsequent reaction.
Well, the
reaction on the part of the readers.
Right. It was called you'rewithinthenorms.com. And what we did was we began to explore it just started just looking at my case and looking at what was going on and those sort of things. And the reaction, there was a small reaction at first. I think one person may have contacted me and said, this is what happened to me, and then gave me their story. And we began to hear from, there were two other people that I've talked about that I was unaware of. I had never met them before. They were Florida A&M graduates, and they were having the same, they had the same issue. Their offices had been raided. And it's funny, turned out it was as we explored even more, we found out that the warrants were almost identical, even down to the same typo errors. So we knew these were copy-paste warrants that they were using against us and stuff. So what we did at that time was we sent, we began to expand, get their information. My brother Walter at the time was a former Detroit police officer. He had retired, and he began to put together the language or began to study these warrants and found out that many of them did not reach the level of probable cause. And in fact, they were just thrown together. Now, we as doctors, and they didn't even claim what we did wrong. They were very general in nature. And we found out later they could do that on the medical providers because the medical providers weren't aware of what was supposed to be a warrant, and their attorneys were not conscious or ignored or didn't understand that these warrants were all cut and paste and were used to entrap, or we had to get to use it as methodologies in which you go into pharmacies. And you're thinking, well, this is the police, they must have authority, but they turn out the warrants are all fraudulent. I mean, in terms of identifying they never identified what we did wrong, except that we were doing pharmacy. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's go back. We do a newsletter. Talk about the conception of that newsletter. What led you to do a newsletter, and what was the headline? Let's say it doesn't, but the subject matter, and you point out that it got a response, and that gave you the confidence to do subsequent posts, subsequent newsletters.
So
and the more you did them,
you're within the norms.com. Yeah, but that blog, we did start off with a newsletter. My son came up with the idea, he said, Dad, this should be a blog. And of course, I didn't know what a blog was. And he told me, he said, yeah, this is how you have a blog. It's a thing that you can do, and they've seen all over the world. You sign up for it, it's easy to create one. It's like YouTube or whatever. And so I put it out there, and I began to write what was happening to me and what it was. And we began, like I said, we began to get a response from that particular blog. So what we did then was we just went on ahead and as we began to hear more and more, we began to use that as a methodology in getting information and shaping our case before we went before the administrative hearing. And little did we know that the DEA was following our blog, and which was fine with me. My attitude was, as long as I tell the truth and tell the facts, and they can't get around that and get it and introduce something else or try some sort of deception in the courtroom setting. That's precisely what happened, though. The courtroom, we found that the courtroom was one thing, but the blog identified something that was entirely different. And that the blog later came on to actually save me from going, the plan was DEA. The plan there was not to put me out of business, but to arrest me and put me and then my entire family in prison. And so they would have gone in and said, well, we got this information, you're arrested. Okay, we're going to indict your wife, your family, and everybody else. If you don't plead, then boom, 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 boom. You see? So, and then there were other things that we had did too, done, which was we recorded everything. A lot of our patients. We wrote down a lot of what our patients were doing. In terms, we talked to them before we would go to cover our behind. We made sure that we did everything by the book, and we went above and beyond, and that sort of thing. And that the DEA was not aware of, but because of technology today, we were able to put that. Like they said, well, this person wasn't in your office, and this person was didn't show up at all. We show no record of it, and boom, we'd have the person on videotape at the office saying, "Yeah, I'm here to get my prescription filled. Why do you drive so far? Well, because I can't get the medication anyplace else. I was referred to you by my doctor. My doctor said you were people treated people with dignity and respect." So the ability to track our patients served as a foundation, which we believe nobody would come in and try to get around that. But of course, the DA was able to get around that because their court system is so rigged.
And you thought your situation was bad when you began to do the blog.
You're tuned in to GHCR.NYC, Grant Houses Community Radio, home of the Community News Service and the soul of the Upper West Side.
All right. Soul of the Upper West Side. Yes, sir.
Hold on a second.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I thought it was another PSA, public service announcement coming. So you thought you're embroiled in defending your business, your livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
You do the blog, people begin to respond. You thought your business situation was bad. What was uncovered that showed you were just the tip, below the tip of the iceberg?
Well, one of the things we found out was that we didn't realize there was people. The blog began to get a lot of interest. I mean, I had like maybe in 1 month I had hits from 200 people. That went from 200 a month to 1,000 a month. Okay, so I'm thinking, I said, well, there's a lot. And then we started getting, letters, and then the blog tracked. These because of the internet, and WordPress was a platform that we used. We began to get people from all over the world that started following the blog, and they would tell their friends, and of course, their friends and their friends, and then people. As a couple of interviews went by, like on radio, it also served as a platform of communication. For example, if I wrote a story, I was going to talk about a person, I would have to normally mail it in or something like that, or it took me some time to get it to the host or so. Or with the blog, all you do is just hit the button, you are for the norms, and that host is there, and they use that as a platform for information that they would interview you with. And then other people would see it, and they'd say, hey, that happened to my friend, or that happened to my girlfriend who was a physician, or or guy I went to school with, and that person would call me. They'd send me their story, and I began to write about it. And then that's how we ran into guys like Dr. Wren, through a young man, a guy who was following us on the blog, and he says, hey, I've been following you. You wrote a story that's applicable. The folks have been talking about this blog, and it just expand. But it also served as information for attorneys that were representing clients. Guys who said, well, I don't know what this is about. And they would look at our blog and follow it. And then peculiarly, in our case, one of the so-called government expert witnesses was we had written about, okay? And the defense attorneys for other people, other pharmacies that had been accused or attacked like this, even the Walmarts, Walgreens, and CVS's, their attorneys would look at the blog and they would develop ideas or turn certain things that we said into case law and then use those in their cases, and those sort of things. And as I said, these expert witnesses, we would point out their flaws in the blog. In our case, there was a guy named Don Sullivan, and he was out of Columbus, Ohio State University. We turned around with a blog about, wrote several stories about him. This, of course, appears in You're Within the Norms. Of course, you could Google it, and it appears in Google when you Google the guy's name. And then if defense attorneys would look at that, they knew how to use the information that was told in our story, what we were reporting, to impeach his testimony. Mm-hmm. And it also, and it exposed what the DEA was really doing. That this was, as we got more people involved in terms of people who were experts, understood the criminal justice system, began to say, hey, this is not the way you do things. This is a criminal organization. We also, through the use of the internet, were able to go to YouTube and find various people who had spoken out in the past and various easy to retrieve stories of former DEA agents, former victims of the DEA, places where they had been in the world and were imposing their will on. We were able to put all that together into blog, and we created, in this case, right now there's currently almost 410 or 420 articles just from this computer I'm sitting in front of alone that he hadn't identified as we began to write more and more and more. And we heard from more. So that people hitting on the blog went from, what, a couple of hundred or so a month to sometimes 7,000-8,000 people a month. Yeah, it hits a month.
Okay.
And this is from all over the world. So it became a platform for people to follow and expose the injustice of the United States Drug Enforcement Agency. Yes, sir.
Well, sliding over to still within the realm of Black-owned pharmacies and including individual practices, talk about the situations that you've heard where if the doctor or the pharmacy owner did not take a plea bargain, they were threatened with their wives going to jail.
Right. We've seen this in several cases where the physicians, for example, the lawyers would tell them, well, you need to take a plea bargain. You remember now, a lot of this stuff was kept quiet until this blog came around. So people suffered in silence. And then what happened is they were told, you take a plea or we're going to indict your family. We're going to indict your mother. We're going to indict your, whoever's working in the pharmacy, your wife. Of course. And especially, this is a technique or a ruse that was used in indicting people who were just told. You got to imagine, these are physicians, the pharmacists. We don't know anything about criminal law. There's no difference between criminal and civil law, okay? And they were unaware, and especially guys from other countries that opened up pharmacies from India, from Africa, Nigeria, or say that, but not all from Nigeria. People from the Caribbean who were in this country, who had become citizens of this country or thinking about citizenship, and they, of course, were talking about the records, and also, they're going to keep their record clean, so they wanted to become a citizen of this country, and so they couldn't afford to have certain things said about them, even though they were not true. This was a way of humiliating them. A lot of people from other countries, this is a family. Everything is family, and so therefore they're proud. People that may live in Lebanon or some part of the continent, and and they're proud. My son, Omar, my son Ashok, is in America. He's in Florida or whatever, Detroit, and he owns a big time farm. There's a big, he's a businessman, and so they looked at this is so when you got targeted like this, you brought shame and disgrace upon your family. And these guys, you got to look at it that way too. So what you're within the norms is very difficult at first talk. It still is to talk to people about this because most of these people are ashamed because they've done nothing wrong. They can't understand it. They've done everything by the book, everything double checked and triple checked, and yet they find themselves under a police indictment or a police authorities coming in and are looking for ways, talking about putting them in jail and those sort of things. So that this is traumatizing to these folks who come in here. And the Black folks, we find out that then this is an extension of racismo that exists in this country, in that we call it regulatory racism. in that we were became the easiest enforcement targets, or they got their training on us before they moved up to someone else. So that's what happened. That's what we started finding there that unfortunately, because of our lack of understanding of the criminal justice system, many of us became targets, and we didn't help ourselves by thinking that we weren't targeted, by not the failure to understand the system. We couldn't imagine, and you talk to these guys, they couldn't imagine. I never thought I did anything wrong, but how the manipulation and conniving the way that the government uses to come in and seize your property or to get you. In other words, this is but padding. We call it prosecutorial padding. They were padding the books with their resumes and stuff like that. Oh, we got Dr. So-and-so, we got this guy so-and-so, oh, he thought he knew more than me, and he's more smarter than you, and all that kind of stuff. But this is a series of corruptive behaviors that have undermined the delivery of health care. And it also catered to the big boys. It protected these big chain store pharmacies. Of course, they got hit, but they just paid a fine. We got hit, and little guys got hit, and they just either put out of business or went to prison. And so people they became terrified people, and it has affected the delivery of health care throughout America.
So the situation is one where you're basically out of business. You're still fighting in the courts to have some type of redress, and there are other situations just like yours in terms of pharmacies being shut down. And I interviewed the brother from Africa who won his case and still didn't get any. That he's been put out of business.
That's Martin Nagel from Nigeria. The guy was in West Virginia. Like I said, Mr. Straightforward, do everything by the book. That doesn't make a difference. But they found a way of undermining his business, and 30 years, or he's 30 years, I think it was, of all this hard work went to hell, went up in smoke. Or the case of Lynn Court Pharmacy. That's Louis Latson, brother, man. I mean, just outstanding. You would have to. Brother was Army Ranger, was an Army Ranger, a Lieutenant Colonel. All the little accomplishments in terms of pledge of fraternity, all of the things he did, made millions. He did compounding and sterile compounding.
Wait.
Yes, sir.
Repeat this situation. This particular situation.
Yeah, Lynn Court. And I didn't find out until after it happened to us. Because
tell the story.
He didn't want to talk about it.
Tell the story. Tell the story.
Anyways, what happened? Right. I'm trying to. Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. So in his case, Lynn Court Pharmacy was this guy graduated. Louis Latson, his name, graduated from the University of Creighton University in Nebraska. Came down here, opened up a pharmacy, and he had the ambition to develop a sterile compounding pharmacy. He got into into compounding. This is before there were compounding like they have now, and he compounded both sterile and non-sterile products. And he got an MBA in business, and he found a niche. That's what he called it. And his niche was making IVs and all this other kind of stuff. All these other kind of real specialty type of pharmacies. And this, we're talking about in the early, maybe 2000, in late 90s, the early 2000s and stuff. Started small, began to grow. and he began to. I mean, what we say, we always try to base it on how profitable, but he began to get up there like $20 and $30 million or so. That's not unusual for a little small guy. I mean, to do, but and there were some of the black guys that were doing this at the same time. You know, they just did what they're supposed to do in pharmacy, and people all over the country began to order from these people and stuff. So they developed a niche, and they developed a very successful business. Well, 20, 30 years down the road, you've got your business going. Here comes the DEA. We believe you're drug trafficking. And that's all they have to say is drug trafficking. And the important thing about that is when you accuse you of drug trafficking, then kicks in these so-called drug laws, on the war on drug laws, where they can just come in and just seize your assets without nothing. Just boom. Accuse you of something, boom. You know, Louis gets a lawyer, finds out, well, I can easily discuss this around. And of course, they keep flip-flopping and change the rules, changing this, or we think you did that. Then they'll go to your suppliers, your wholesalers, and all they have to say to your wholesaler is, stop selling to the Latson, okay? And they'll stop selling because they want to keep their licenses too. Or they'll send somebody over to do a fake investigation. And I'll say fake investigation. The real intent is once they say they're going to investigate you, you're essentially out of business. And so this is what happened to Latson, you know, and his business decline, it screws up your credit, it screws up everything. Everything you think of. You can't have dysfunction at your business level. Well, this is what happened. This is what the DA, and they know this is destabilization. And eventually that person has to sell. They will sell to a big company, or they may sell to another unsuspected guy who wants to open up a pharmacy. That person will become successful, and then boom, it'll happen. And then maybe 10 years down the road. But that's how they do it. And again, black people of color are targeted. It's not about them doing anything wrong. It's the police, in this case, gaining their numbers. You know, prosecutors making their numbers so they can get the higher legal term. I call it become judges, for example, or be able to pad their resume so that they can get into become partners in law firms. They get in there and stuff like that, and then represent a client against the DA, saying, well, we know all about this, but this is the kind of ruthlessness that takes place in here. But it also serves as another thing, too. It serves just like in Tulsa. It's a subtle lynching, all right? It's what Carol Anderson describes as white rage. If you look at Carol Anderson's videos, she says, what is it? Well, this rage. She talks about Amadou Diallo. You know, she said that it's not this guy's raged upon him. And so what does it target? It's subtle. This is a racism that targets black people that are ambitious, black people that have the ability, black people who have that will refuse to be subjugated. It has a very specific target. Okay, you target that class of knowledge, that knowledge base. You can easily destabilize it because, again, there's very few people once you get to this level that are going to defend you. You can't go to the NAACP because they're not organized for that kind of stuff, or your professional black organization. They're social organizations. Okay? So, and another thing it does, and the government knows, it's a way of preventing passing on generational wealth. In other words, my grandkids who came in and work at my pharmacy, Granddaddy, I want to open up a pharmacy. Oh, Granddaddy, I like what you're doing. You got to work around your business. They can't do that anymore. Granddaddy, what happened? You know, what do you tell? But you see this in all these families, you know, and these are people, you know, what I was able to do as a businessman, I was able to support a lot of various organizations, donate a lot of money for scholarship. That's gone. support my grandkids. My kids past this generation, they were very extremely proud their dad was their granddad, and we took our money not only to donate and take care of business, but also had a little scholarship for our kids, and we traveled all over the world. Grandkids, we went to France and London. I got these kids to see the whole world, and that's just like these are things I couldn't do when I was a kid. That's why you see this state of civilization. And anybody that can come in here and walk in, instead of being a pharmacist, I'm a drug dealer, and I have to defend myself from our point. And our Black organizations and Black people, in particular our media, are so culturally conditioned that they even have come to accept themselves as being inferior. So when we took on this path of fighting these folks, oh man, we, like I said, we published 400 something articles so far, and still have gotten very little results.
Okay. All right. So, in terms of our next interview, I'd like for you to, with your brother Walter and others who are looking at this thing very closely, lay out the methodology. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Play the role of the DEA. Play the role of the DEA planning to put some Black businesses out of business. And if you look at go ahead.
Yeah. Here, let me say something here. Today we had, for example, one of the things that we wrote about just recently. We talked about medical racism. Okay, or things like that. This whole systemic racial policy. Well, where Black folk and Black doctors, because they're targeted, do not prescribe certain medications. Okay, do not are limited in control. We got they call that CDC policies, so we've been to that before. But interesting, this thing in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where he had this mass shooting, guy comes up and he shoots his doctor. Well, that happens all the time. But they don't shoot their doctors. Generally, they shoot themselves. So we call the suicide rate of people who are needing these type of treatments, these pain treatments, okay, that have been so misclassified they can't get them, and the doctors are simply afraid to treat these patients. These pain suicide patients are these people generally commit suicide. In this case, this guy had been needing his medication, back surgery, extremely painful. All right, and probably the doctor, and I'm not sure, did not even want to give him any more medication. But the patient was being undertreated. Okay, and he was in so much pain and so mad he got his guns. Instead of turning on himself, he turned them on the doctor. And I bet through the next couple of weeks, when we go through this case of why Dr. Preston Phillips is dead, it will come as a result of this so-called misapplication of the Controlled Substance Act being forced upon him by the Drug Enforcement Agency and the DOJ. Because remember, we got doctors who've simply done the right thing in terms of treating people with dignity and respect and taking care of their patients, and are doing lifetime in prison. We write about this in our book, in our blog, You're Within the Norm. And we've identified it, and we put videos of that. So our blog has served as a platform. As we said, we leave no stone unturned, no subject untouched, and no behind unkicked, as we put it, as a platform throughout the world to expose the injustice and the disparity within the medical system. And we also use that, and I know we talked about it, we have a place where we would accept donations if people are so likely, but we'll talk about that later. We can't do that here. But the point is that we are exposing the injustice in in this system. And this system, it hasn't changed. You know, you can get the highest degree, and I've got all kind of degrees, okay? And you see them, Dr. Wynn, the people with the most skill, people with the ability, the people that can control disease states and take care of folks to promote the longevity and lives of people. Okay? Understand diseases that occur within folks of color. Understand what stress is, how to reduce it, and those sort of things. You know, understand the environment, and even not just black, but white who practice in black neighborhoods, Indian doctors, people of color, who practice in black neighborhoods, particularly. I'm gonna use the word particularly because we are used as a stepping stone to go after everybody, and then start suffering from the same thing, and that's what's happening here. Mm-hmm.
So in essence,
and
once
I'll say
again,
one thing.
Go ahead.
Huh? Oh, yeah. And the problem here is that our media has failed so bad, except for you know, of course, and a few others, Dr. McIntosh, and Carl Nelson, and, you know, Wilma Leon, who come out and say, hey, there's something wrong here. But for the most part, we're not even believed at all. We're like, oh, y'all must have done something wrong. You know how it is, you know, and just the failure. Like I said, we've come to believe it, and some of our how do you say our so-called civil rights organizations have been worth two dead beans. I mean, two dead flies. All right. And I'm not the only one to say this. Okay? Ron Myers, for example, who was an MD, graduated from the University of Wisconsin, a preacher, and a classically trained jazz musician, trumpet. Okay, just a talented person. He died. And there's an interview of him and a woman named Linda Cheeks, who's an MD, and he talks about this. You would think that these organizations would have jumped on this already, but they're not. A lot of them are just empty vessels, is what I call them. That's insane, or loaded with what we call what's our best word? Filtered Negroes, or you know, those kind of folks who you know, I call them holy be ghosts, holy on Sunday and ghosts on Monday. Hadn't seen them since the last awful ring, but the prayer they gave me the whole community say, hey, talk a good game. And that's what we're having here. And folks who are afraid to move. And we're done it. Yes, sir.
How do people connect with you?
How do people? You can reach us at youarewithinthenorms.com. Pardon? Yeah. And you can reach us at our Cash App, $Dr.Norm. You can see it's on our blog. You can reach us on our blog to leave any comment on our blog. You can call me at my phone number, which is 313-510-3378. Again, that's 313-510-3378. Or you can call YWTN 33782 at gmail.com. It's all there. We've opened access. It's all there. And you can read youarewithinthenorms.com. Youarewithinthenorms.com. And that's again, you are within. Let's put you are within the norms, and it'll pop up. And it's also podcasts, so you can hit there on Spotify, and you can even listen. If you don't want to read it, then you can listen. You know, and you can. I'm telling you something. The podcasts are I think are just amazing. I think, wow, did we write that? Wow, it really gives it in detail. But when you're on our platform, you're really missing something if you don't look at the platform, because there are a lot of links in there. There's a lot of videos in there. There's some YouTube videos. There's the actual thing. So when I say that a patient said he didn't get his medication, bam, the patient comes up. I didn't get my medication. I did so and so, and they'll go into detail on it. We ask a lot of questions. That's the problem. One of the things that the DEA and the Department of Justice is struggling with right now. They can't get around their own lies. What we call penetrate the deception. So that's how you can reach us. Mm-hmm.
Okay. One last time for your phone number, sir.
It's 313-510-3378, and that's the same number to our Zelle. So if you got Zelle, you can say 313-510-3378, but drop $100 in there. We're asking for. If you got more, we will take more. But again, we accept all the electronic means of at least keeping this project going, because we have affected a lot of folks in terms of their giving them the confidence. Because I'm saying, we had people that I was ready to commit suicide. These are physicians, these are doctors, I mean, these are pharmacists. I'm not just frank. People from all specialties, surgeons, internal medicine specialists, anesthesiologists, psychiatrists, call upon us and talk long hours talking about what has happened to them as a result of this injustice. And another thing, we publish their projects out there and stuff. And we certainly appreciate people like Dr. Baylor here who have kept our movement going, or you want to call it that, and the fraternity. I guess some of the brothers in the fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi, who have taken out and donated to our cause, because this is extreme. I've lost millions of dollars, and anybody knew me knew that I did what I said I was going to do. You know, when I got into business, I went out and reached out to my community and to the people who got me there and took care of business. So we did. Now I need your help. So again, that's 313-510-3378, YWTN33782 at gmail.com. You can reach me there too. Mm-hmm. And always, GrovertonandNorris.com. We always have that available to you, and I try to keep a smile on your face.
Dr. Norman, once again, thank you very much. Thank you and the other pharmacists.
Thank you so much for having us.
Who are standing up and bringing this information to us. It's critical information once you look at the perspective that includes Black farmers, the pharmacies, the medical practices, etc. My brother, thank you. May God continue to bless you.
Thank you.
Yes,
sir.
With the inclusive spirit of the other brothers who join with you in fighting the injustices coming by way of the DEA. God bless you, my brother.
God bless you too. Thank you.
This has been another edition of the Wisdom Table. Please share this information with others. It's our media, our medium, our way of sharing the information beats the individuals who do not publish or want to publish or give voice to the injustices going on in the Black community. Thank you for listening to the Wisdom Table. Good night.
All right.
Big drums. Tell the real story. For the people who would condemn in slavery time their brothers and sisters who were being ignorant. Listen to the story the drums tell. They say, you black man,